of you have seen Brooklyn Castle? All right, a small handful. It's a fabulous movie. It's about to come out on DVD. We're hearing a lot of buzz about a Oscar nomination, and I think it's just the epitome of what after school can do. Who would have thought that a bunch of inner city kids from Brooklyn, New York, could be the junior high chess champions of the United States of America? This film, the program it highlights, shows exactly what our after-school programs can do. Introduce our students to activities that were previously intimidating and make them cool. The movie's not just about chess. The movie showcases the best of how after-school focuses on our children as individuals. And you see that even in this little clip between the community-based organizations, the teachers, the vice principal, working with each of those kids to build their social and emotional skills because they know that those skills are really important to their success. The stories in Brooklyn Castle, just like all of our stories of real students, are what we need to be telling to showcase the value and the power of after school. They bring our work alive and they make it real. With all the problems facing our country, I'm firmly convinced that after school programs and summer learning programs, the work we're doing is a big part of the solution. We are literally changing lives every single day, creating opportunities that didn't exist before. And we need to tell these stories of the students that we have touched. At the After School Alliance, we created something called the Storybook Project. What we've asked is for students, for after-school leaders across the country to send in their stories, send in the ways that their lives have been touched by after-school programs so that we can share these with the media, with our policymakers, with our friends, and really get absolute examples of where lives have been touched. I wanted to tell a story. For those of you that have seen the film, one of the stars of the film is Pobo Efekoro. Pobo is president of a student body, New York State chess champion, and all over student leader. When you see the film, you'll see him talking about his goals. He wants to go to law school, he wants to be a prosecutor, he wants to be a senator, he has eyes on the presidency. This is a kid This is a kid that is on a fast track to success. And already, he's now a sophomore in high school. He's been on The Daily Show, so some of you may have seen him there. We've honored him in Washington, D.C., where he's spoken to members of Congress, and he's just a superstar. But for Pobo, it wasn't always that way. When he was younger, he was constantly getting into trouble in school. He was suspended, and he was on the fast track in the wrong direction. What turned it around for him? His after-school program. The reason he went was because he wanted to travel. He lives in poverty. Travel was not an option, and he knew that the after-school chess team would allow him to go different places. So he joined, and for him, that was the door that opened. If you talk to Pobo now, who is an after-school advocate, he'll say for him it was chess. For other students, it can be something else. It can be art, it can be music, it can be dance. But it's the friendships, the relationships, the caring adults that they get to interact with. That's the reason he and his friends are in school, and that's the reason they all believe that they have huge opportunities ahead of them. One of the things that I find so tragic when you watch the movie about Brooklyn Castle is here you have this unbelievable program. A documentary has been made about it. It won the junior high school chess championships. Last year, this junior high team actually won the high school national chess championship for all of America. Yet year after year, it faces being eliminated. And the reason it faces elimination is because constantly people keep thinking of after school as something that's nice for our kids, but not necessary. Brooklyn Castle IS 318, it's not alone. Oops, let's go back. Oh, I'm missing a slide. At the After School Alliance, we actually did a survey of programs all across the country, and one of the things we found is that they're really struggling. It may be that you're hearing the recession's over, but in our poorest communities, that's not the case. They're struggling more than ever, and we're seeing program after program have to close its doors, have to let go of staff, have to cut back on some of the programming, like travel, that we think is so important to our kids, just so that they can keep their doors open. And unfortunately, I think this is going to get worse. We're looking at, all the talk in Washington is about balancing the budget, sequestration, more cuts. We're seeing state budget cuts. We're seeing local budget cuts. We know that for many of our families, they can't afford to pay any more for the after-school care and the summer learning programs they're paying for. So we need to do something about it. We're all here today because we are so excited and energized by the cutting-edge learning that's happening in our after-school programs and our summer learning programs. We cannot afford to lose these programs. Now, more than ever, they're needed by our students and they're needed by our working families. That's why it's so important that we share these stories of the kids, of the students whose lives we're impacting. One of the examples that I like to use today, because it is all about the messages, and I think Carla made a really good point about that, is STEM learning, because STEM is really hot. It's something that the after-school movement is embracing, and it's something that the STEM community is embracing. As I like to say, STEM is literally exploding in after school, and kids like to explode things. Now we've seen this because STEM learning, while it may be intimidating at first to kids, once they get down and dirty, it is exciting and it is fun. It's why so many of our partners, businesses, museums, colleges, universities, they're embracing the flexibility and the freedom to teach STEM in a way that engages our students through hands-on activities in an environment that is free from testing and grading. But I like to focus on STEM because it does so much more. I think it's a perfect example of the kinds of learning that move way beyond academics. Students in STEM programs learn that our best discoveries and our most powerful learning opportunities often occur when an experiment fails or it doesn't quite turn out as planned. These programs teach you that the process is even more important than the result, and that if throughout the process your project fails, there's an important lesson to be learned that might even turn out to be something better than the original project that you had invented. Our STEM programs really work to build confidence and self-esteem of our students. They involve collaboration and teamwork, both with peers and adults, and they often provide mentors and role models from the community to guide and inspire our students. These important skills and this kind of learning is rarely part of our discussions in Washington about education. In Washington and across the country, our leaders are focused almost exclusively on high-stakes testing and academics at the expense of social skills, emotional skills, and the principles of child and youth development. And this really concerns me because I think this is where the messaging is posing a real problem for those of us in the after-school and summer learning field. Far too often, and I know I fall into this trap, after-school advocates are forced into this dangerous trap of talking exclusively about academics and test scores. This is a big mistake. A strategy of divide and conquer is being used against us, an effort to pit after-school funding against funding for our schools. Head-to-head, if policymakers and voters are forced to choose between after-school and school, we all lose and our students lose. I wanted to talk a bit about what's going on in the federal government and 21st century. Right. My slides are all backwards. 21st century community learning centers. As you'll see, 21st century community learning centers is the only federal funding stream dedicated exclusively to before school, after school, and summer learning. During the Clinton administration, we were able to see a surge in funding thanks to advocacy. And ever since then, thanks to really strong bipartisan support, even in an era of deep budget cuts, we've been able to maintain and even gradually increase funding for 21st century. Having said that, these funding levels at about $1.1 billion where we are now, it's nowhere near enough. On any given day, more than 15 million children are going home unsupervised after school. And we know from surveys that we've done at the After School Alliance that there are more than 18 million children that would be in after-school programs if they could afford them and they were available. Appropriations funding for after school is going to be a constant threat, especially in the upcoming years while we talk about sequestration, even if we keep postponing it, budget cuts. And the bipartisan support that we've worked so hard to garner has kept us safe, but it's absolutely no guarantee. But the thing that I'm actually most worried about in Washington isn't the funding cuts. I think that if we see funding cuts, they're going to be part of funding cuts for a host of programs that are going to be disastrous for low-income families and children. What I'm most worried about is policy changes to after-school funding. and the real threat of diverting dollars, and you've heard some of this already, from existing after-school and summer learning programs to fund a longer school day. And this is very real. The Obama administration, who their rhetoric is fabulous when it comes to after school, but the reality is that they have made extending the school day, adding time to the school day, a legacy project, which means they want to do everything and anything they can to make that happen. Tens of millions of private dollars have been raised to pilot expanding learning projects. Several very large federal investments, such as SIG, Race to the Top, and I3 grants, as well, have been used to pilot a longer day. But the truth is, it's not enough. Even when a school is getting a couple $1 million in SIG money, it's really not enough to sustain a longer school day. So you have $1.1 billion sitting in after school, and they have their eye on it. The Department of Education, the U.S. Department of Education, when they issued their idea for education reform, ESEA reform, they actually inserted a provision that would not only allow after-school funding to be used to fund a longer school day, it would prioritize adding time to the school day over after school. Now, as most of you know, ESEA reauthorization, it's not going anywhere fast. There's a big fight going on between the Senate and the House. What a surprise, Washington can't agree. But in what is not known to many people is when the Obama administration issued waivers for No Child Left Behind, they included a tiny little waiver to allow states to use 21st century dollars to extend the school day. So they bypassed law. Despite the fact that there weren't any complaints about 21st century funding, they decided they were going to go ahead and do it anyway. We've been working extremely hard with the Department of Ed on an interpretation of that waiver. I'm going to spare you all the details now. What I can say is that it's nowhere near as bad as it could be. The details and the requirements go a lot deeper than just adding time, but it's unclear if the states are really going to follow that. I think right now it's a bit of a mess. Most of the states really don't know what to do, and you're hearing stories of adding 15 minutes to a math class or 20 minutes to an English class using after-school dollars to do this. In the Senate, it's not that much better. Senator Harkin has decided that this is going to be part of his legacy too. So in the Senate ESEA reauthorization bill, there's a language and a provision that once again allows 21st century dollars to be used to add time to the school day. What's even worse is that Senator Harkin is not only the powerful chairman of the Senate committee that determines education reform, he's the powerful chairman of the Senate committee that determines funding for after school. And again, you know, where I feel like we're getting stabbed in the back, he's decided that since ESEA is not going to happen anytime soon, for the past 4 years, he has tried to insert language into the federal appropriations bill, the funding bill, to change policy on 21st century and allow it to be used to extend the school day. So it is not dull in Washington, and we are fighting a real bipartisan effort to try and keep that out and not change the law in a funding bill. The worst part about all of this, the thing that gets me most upset, is this is the wrong battle. In the handful of schools where they're piloting a longer school day, the longer day still ends hours before parents get home from work. So there's still a need for after-school programs. There's also the politics of it. Right now, because 21st Century is at $1.1 billion, we have a federally funded after-school program in almost every single congressional district. What that means is that we have a lot of congressional champions. And when we don't, we can find a program in their district and get those people to talk to them about the difference it's making back home. If we're going to use after-school dollars to pay for a mandatory extension of time in schools, for every school where we go that deep, adding maybe 1 hour to the school day, we're going to eliminate 7 after-school programs. That's going to mean a lot fewer sites. And a drastic reduction in the number of sites is going to lead to a drastic reduction in political support because members will have no reason to care about the program. But that's not even the biggest danger. I am going to get positive, I promise. I really am a positive person. But this is my biggest fear. My biggest fear is that if after-school funding becomes just another federal funding source for what happens during the school day, we've lost. We risk losing the entire program. If we are doing exactly what they're doing with SIG dollars, Title I dollars, there's nothing that makes us special. And that's what's being proposed in the House of Representatives. So the House of Representatives, their ESEA reform proposal, what it does is it takes all the programs in the Department of Education and just block grants them. So no 21st century, no Title I, it's all gone. And that, I think we can fight that back. I mean, after school programs have been popular because they're unique, but we need, if we want to protect these programs, if we want to expand these programs, we need to show how they are unique and different from school. If our conversations are limited to academic skills and test scores, we get caught pitting after-school programs against school funding. This shortchanges, as I've said before, both our students, our families, and all of our programs. The reality is we need to remember our roots. After-school programs are popular because they are a lifeline for our working parents, and we can't forget them. After-school programs are embraced because they keep students safe. They give them an alternative to gangs, to drugs, to a whole host of inappropriate behaviors. And these days, it gives them an alternative to sitting home alone, perhaps playing computer games, perhaps doing something else, but definitely not learning the social and emotional skills that are so important to their development. And I think this is where we can start getting positive, because after-school programs are voluntary. This is where we've learned to provide programming that excites and energizes our students, and this is what makes us so special and at the cutting edge of learning. If kids don't want to come to our programs, they're not going to exist. We have to make them want to come. And as I said, this is the entree to talk about the exciting, engaging, and challenging learning that brings us all here today. As you look at this chart, whether you have a longer school day or not, the reality is that most of our learning time is not going to occur in school. The after-school and summer learning community has been at the forefront of expanded learning, and I like that term, by the way, expanded learning, during times when students are not in school. We can use all of this attention about time, about kids needing supervision, to start a discussion, the discussion we're having today, about what kinds of learning our students need to succeed, and to showcase the best practices that we all have to share. Whether learning's happening as part of a school day, before school, after school, over the summer, now more than ever is the time to advocate for policies that embrace the principles outlined today. Active, collaborative, and meaningful learning, giving our students the opportunity to master skills, and encouraging students to get out of their comfort zone. If we do this right, the learning will include the social and emotional skills that are as important to student success as academics. Just a little note, last week I was actually invited to advise the Vice President and his task force on a new legislation and new energy that they're trying to put in after the tragedy at Sandy Hook and gun violence. And I was surprised. We were the second group to meet. They had met with police chiefs, and when I showed up at the meeting, there were only 13 of us. And the meeting was chaired by Arnie Duncan. So it was a really, oh gosh, I'm out of time. It was a really intimate meeting. And the good news was we focused almost exclusively on social emotional skills. So I think this provides an opportunity, and not just for the kids that are the outsiders, but the kids that are bullying, the kids that are not including other kids. And I just wanted to share with you our recommendations, because I think there is a chance in the wake of tragedy to do something, which were more focused on social emotional skills, giving every kid a chance to be with a caring adult or mentor, a place where children feel like they belong, particularly those that feel like they're outsiders. They need a comfort zone where they belong. Physical activity. Kids need to let off steam. We don't talk about that enough. And different measurements. I think after-school programs do this brilliantly, and I think we need to be using the right measurements if we're going to track student success. And right now, we're on the wrong track. I know you've heard a lot about the Common Core. They may be better tests, but they're still academic tests. And the reality is, when you talk about Common Core, there's no talk about social emotional skills and about a lot of the skills we care about today. And if that's the test that's being used, we're still in trouble. So I urge you all, when you advocate not just for programs, we need to be looking at things like student attitudes, like attendance, like confidence, like collaboration, beyond whatever tests we have now or the Common Core. Otherwise, we're destined to fail, and the things we care about are destined to be, second tier and a nice add-on rather than something all of our schools and our after-school programs strive to do. I know I'm out of time, but I do want to leave you with one last hope as I jump ahead, which is to raise your voices, to be loud. The work we're doing is absolutely essential. It's changing lives. And time again, after-school programs have been threatened with funding cuts. Time and time again, they've tried to close our doors. And time again, we've raised our voices. We've gotten people on the ground, our parents, our students, our programs to shout about the value of their programs, and we've won. We even convinced a Republican Congress to beat back proposed cuts by President Bush. And that's a pretty tough thing to do. So I urge you, as you think about today, as you think about all the great things we all care about, not just to think, but to act, and to use the energy and the passion of this conference, of the types of learning that we all so believe in, to raise your voices and make a difference, and to get other voices, because it can't just be us in the room. We need our business leaders, our police chiefs, our civic leaders, to all be out there, clamoring that the work we do in after school and summer is a necessity, and it's something that all of our kids deserve to have access to. Thank you.